Hey there. It's been a couple of months since I created my last video on this channel, and the reason why I'm creating this one is to have a place where my Padawans, my students, can refer this particular process. The title already should give you an idea of what this video is going to be about, and that's going to be setting up Tailwind in well, setting up React using Vite and setting up Tailwind in a React project. It's not going to have Tailwind, I mean TypeScript, because for beginners, you always start with JavaScript before TypeScript. So the setup is going to be for JavaScript, although nothing much changes in terms of the folder structure when you choose to go with TypeScript. It's only the naming of the files and the build process that is involved changes a bit to accommodate TypeScript. So now, disclaimer, um, it's 41 minutes past midnight, and tomorrow I have a session, and so I haven't perfected this. The audio might be bad, the video might be bad, but hopefully it works. And so if you hear some background noise, if there is static, I haven't had time to set up my OBS since the last time my laptop crashed at some point, and so I lost my SSD, which had the previous installation of OBS, which means I lost all my settings and it's not things I had memorized. So I've not set up my OBS, and so audio might not be as good, but it should be okay at least. So, not wasting any more time, let me get right into it. It's already been 2 minutes. I'm going to be starting from scratch, and this is not a scripted video. I do not like scripting videos because when you script, you're not really showing the reality of things. The reality of development is that mistakes are made, looking up happens, but the moment a video is scripted, then everything just works because you had time to perfect it. Now I've just hit record on this, and so it's going to be a bit of looking things up here and there, fixing bugs, one or two, forgetting things, messing up, but that's part of the process. So, when it comes to React and building React apps, now we're not. I'm not covering frameworks, so no Next.js, no Remix, none of that. It's just plain React. Because that is where you always start. You always start with plain React before you move on to a framework. Now with plain React, you have two options. You have create React app, this, but it was recently deprecated. I can't remember when that happened, and so in as much as it is going to work, it's not advisable that you use it. There's a better tool now called Vite, and that's in vite.dev. Now Vite is not a React tool. It's more general. You can use it for building a lot of JavaScript specific libraries or projects. So whether that's React, whether it's just plain JavaScript, TypeScript, look through the guide. You'll see all the possibilities: vanilla, Vue, React, Preact, Lit, Svelte, Solid, Quick, and so this is not a React specific tool. It's just a JavaScript build tool, and this is what is now advisable when you're scaffolding, when you're creating your application. And so where you always want to go to get started is at vite.dev/guide. That is where you'll find the most up-to-date information. So if you're watching this tutorial like 3 years from now, or maybe even 1 year from now, things may be different. If you go through my channel, you'll see the last two videos I made. They are pretty much covering the same topic. setting up Tailwind. But when I made the first one, 1 or 2 months later, Tailwind moved from version 3 to version 4, and version 4 works a bit different, so I had to make a new video. So if you follow my version 3 video to set up Tailwind now, you might run into issues. So even with this particular tutorial, just go to the documentation. Don't follow everything I do blindly. Go to the documentation and check whether something has changed since the time that I uploaded this video. So when you want to get started, I use npm most of the time. Well, depending on the project, sometimes you will use pnpm. So for this, we're going to be using npm. So this is the command that you want to execute where you want to create your project. I'm going to show you creating folder structure. Now I'm doing this for my students, but it should apply for the general public as well. So the way that I show them how to create projects is, well, we build using the man stack, and so you have one project with a server and client side, and those normally live in the same folder. So we're going to create a general folder for that project. I will go into my, so the bootcamp that I instruct at is called Go My Code. Don't know whether I have any general projects folder in here. I do not. So I'll just create a projects folder, then move into that projects folder. And for this, I'm going to use an application that we're currently building with 2 cohorts. It's called Charity Minds. I won't really go into detail of what it does. There's a GitHub repo on my account. I have several of those. Charity Minds should be this one. I will link to it in the description below, but or you can pause this video, just read through this and what it does. So the process that we've been following is we started with plain HTML, CSS, and JS. Then we built a new version using Tailwind. So we have the HTML, CSS, and JS one, plain. Then you build one using Tailwind. And then the idea is to then take that Tailwind version and now rebuild it using React. So to go from just plain HTML and CSS and JS to using React. And this is that is why I'm creating this video and using this project, because I know students from those 2 cohorts will be able to then use this as their guide, but it should apply to you no matter what kind of project you're working. I'm just using this one as an example. So I'm going to create the project folder for it. So this is Charity Minds, and I'll just add React on there. And then in here, this is where I would have the server and the client folders. For this tutorial, we are covering the client, just the React side, not the server side. I might later do another where I'm building the server for this, but for this particular one, it is just client. But I want to have both of those folders for the sake of future-proofing this, because I know we will build a server for it. So ideally, what I do and what I teach is to create those 2 folders. Now, the naming of the folder doesn't really matter. You can call it backend and frontend, server and client. You choose. That's upon you. This is just my preference. So once we have those 2 folders, we'll then move into the client. And then this is where we will execute that command. Remember the Vite command, npm create Vite at latest. So we're going to copy that and just paste it. Now, since I am already in the client folder, I want the React application to be created in this current folder. So I do not want to create a new folder inside the client folder to hold my React project. I want the React project to be created in the current folder. So I'm going to use the dot to signify that I want Vite to scaffold the application in the current folder. So once I do that, Vite is going to ask you some questions. I do not have the latest version, so I'm going to install it by typing on Y and hitting enter. So select a framework. As you mentioned earlier, Vite is not specific to React, and so you're able to create create an Angular project. Marco, didn't even know there's a framework called Marco. Might look into it a bit. No, I won't. No shiny syndrome, no shiny object syndrome here. So you can use it for Marco, Angular, Quick, Solid, Svelte, Lit, Preact, React, Vue, Vanilla. We're just interested in React. Don't let the shiny object syndrome get to you, where you see a new JavaScript project and or library or framework, and you want to jump right into it. Now, focus. So React, that is what we're interested in. That is what has brought us here. So a variant, here you have the options, these options. Some of these are redwood SDK. I have no idea what that is. React Router v7. So you can choose to go the React Router v7 route, but for the sake of starting from scratch, we are going to choose the JavaScript, and then we will manually add React Router. If you want to go straight into an application that already has routing already set up, you can scaffold this application using React Router. Now, React Router is something that I advise when you're getting started, just add it manually, configure it yourself, set up the outlets, everything yourself, so that you can gain an understanding of how routing is done through React Router. So we are going to select JavaScript. Now, since this is geared towards beginners, people who are just getting introduced to React, my assumption is that by now you've not tried to go into TypeScript. My advice is always, before you go to Next, build some projects with React. Same way, before you go to TypeScript, build some projects with JavaScript, plain JavaScript. So we're going to select JavaScript, then use roll down Vite. This is new. Don't remember ever being asked this, so this is likely with that new version of Vite. I don't know what it means. I'm not going to go into the research right now because I don't want to make this video too long. So I'll just select no. No is actually selected by default, and we can see that this is an experimental feature. Again, I have no idea what it does, so I'm not going to comment on it. Others I'll be giving you information that I'm just pulling out of thin air. So I'll select no, install with npm and start now. Yes. So that's another thing that the previous versions of Vite, okay, the last time I used Vite, it wasn't even asking you whether you want to install with npm. So it will scaffold the application, and then you would have to run npm install manually. So with this new version, it does that. It runs the npm install, and it even starts the server. So previously, with the previous version of Vite, this is why I mentioned earlier that it's important for you to just follow the documentation, even as you're watching this tutorial, in case something has changed. So with that, we have the server running, and we can confirm that our React application is here, and we can see some state management. So this is what you get by default when you use Vite to scaffold a React application. And I'll just stop the server so that we can have a moment to look through what exactly has been done. So this folder was previously empty. Now it has all of these files and these folders. By now I'm hoping that you already know what node modules are. If you don't know what node modules are, you should probably take a moment and go and revise that, what node is, node and npm. So node.js, and npm. So read up on that. I'm not going to, again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into detail explaining what node modules is, package.json. Just do some research. I always tell my students, anytime that you encounter something that you don't know, open your Chrome, go to ChatGPT, ask it, hey, what's node modules? Explain it to me in as much detail as possible. And it's going to do that, and you're going to learn. That's how you learn. New thing, research it. Then come back with the understanding of that new thing that you have encountered. It takes time, especially if you're building something, to learn as you continue building. It will take longer, but then if you don't learn it in that moment, then you'll be doing things that you don't understand. That's not good for you. So do things that you understand. So this is what we have, and this is a single page application, and so the only HTML file that you're going to find in this entire application is the index.html that is in the root. So I'm going to open this with Visual Studio Code. You can use cursor if that's what you have installed. So we can just go through this folder structure. Again, we have the node modules, public folder, the src, and these other files: gitignore, eslint, index, package log, package, readme, vitconfig.js. Now, development will happen in here, like 90%. Well, let me not use a figure for that because that's a guess. That it's 90%. Maybe it's 99. Okay, let's say a lot of the development work that you do, majority of the development work that you do will happen inside the src folder. So this is where you have all your components, all your pages, all your routing. It is all going to happen in here. The outside will mostly maintain this structure. Depending on what you add into your project, you might have other files, but for the most part, it will mostly maintain this structure. Now, what you have here is a basic React application, and the best way to understand where, or rather how everything is connected, is to go to the index.html. Now, if you look at this index.html, it's a very simple HTML file that has two important things important in this context: this div and this script. If you follow this, you will find that, hey, there's one script file that is being loaded as a module, and that's the main.jsx file. That main.jsx file is inside the source. So if you follow that path, you're going to find the main.jsx, and in here you will find the next clue as to how things are running. We have this app, this create route, this render. Now, this is not a React tutorial. This is just setting up React. For my students who are watching this, we will go through all this in more detail. But for the sake of just following this tutorial for the setup process, that is all I'm going to explain, right? Or to touch on. You have the app imported from this file. That file is right here. And if you look inside it, you have all the things that we saw earlier. Remember the logo, the image for Vite, the image for React. Let me run this. Do not run ntt dot on your own terminal unless you have my aliases. I always mention this. Well, not always. I mention this in a lot of my videos where I use an alias. This is a custom alias. It won't work if you execute it in your terminal. But what it does is it opens a new I think I have a tutorial for this actually. Can't quite remember, but I think so. Check my channel. I believe I created a tutorial for how to have a command that opens a new terminal tab. That's what entity is, but it's a custom one. So I want to run the application here with nrd, again an alias. For you, if you do not have these aliases, this is going to be npm run dev so that you can execute this dev script right here, right? So this Vite plus React, that is coming from app.jsx right here. Then the count coming from state. We're going to see what state is, not in this video, in session. For my students, that is. If you're not my student and you don't know what state is, I've just told you what to do when you encounter something new. Open a new tab, research it. What is state in React? That's where you start. And then the information to edit source app.jsx and save to test HMR, hot module reloading. So I'll open this side by side and just delete everything in here. So from there to there, save that file, and now we have a blank document. And then hello from YouTube. There we go. So that's React, very basic application. Not going to go beyond this point with the React stuff. The next thing I would want to do, since remember this is just a setup video, is to install Tailwind. So Tailwind is what is really popular in the React world. So coupling React with Tailwind, you'll see a lot of that going on. And with most of the AI tools that have come up over the last few months to like 1-2 years, they mostly build using Tailwind. They've been trained for that, and so it's quite popular. So we're going to set it up in our React application so that we can have, if this is, let's say, a H1, right now it has some styling, and I'll just get rid of the styling that comes by default. Also remove everything in the index.css. Then we just now have the default browser styles for that H1. So what I want to do is to be able to use not children but class name, and having there something like texts 2xl. That's a Tailwind class. You can see when I do that and I save the file, right now it doesn't do anything. I want to also be able to, in other words, I want to be able to use Tailwind from my React application. And so the way that we do that is by setting up Tailwind. So let me get rid of this state stuff as well. So we just have a plain app component. You don't have to do this. It's not part of the setting up Tailwind. I'm just cleaning up the file. You can leave it as it was. No problem. So the best place to find information of how to set up Tailwind is in the documentation. Again, documentation will always have the most up-to-date information. And if you've watched my previous video in setting up Tailwind on a plain HTML, CSS, and JS project, then you know that for that we use the Tailwind CLI. Now, since this is a Vite project, we are going to go with using Vite. That is where the instructions for setting up on our Vite project are going to be. And with Vite, as we mentioned earlier, it's not really just a React thing. And so if you're setting up Tailwind with any other kind of framework that you've used Vite for, this guide is what you want to use. For our case, it's React, and so that's what we're going to follow. So this first command here, this is the command that we executed in order to scaffold our application right here. So remember, the only difference was that we told it to create in the current folder. And so if we were running it when we are in this folder, we'd have told it to create in the client folder. but we're already in the client folder, so we told it to create in the current folder. So skip this because we've already done it. Skip this as well. We've already done it. We are inside our client folder. And so the next thing to do is to just install Tailwind. And thank you, Tailwind team, for adding this this copy button right here. I think in one of my previous videos I mentioned that I should just have added a copy to clipboard button so that you don't have to highlight the command, Control C, then go to Control V, just click and it's copied. So we'll paste it and paste it right there and run it. So remember, you must be in the root of your Vite project. Do not be in server, do not be in the main project folder, be in the client folder. If you've named yours frontend, be in the frontend folder. Then install that, those two packages when you're in there. The next thing is to configure the Vite plugin. Now, this point right here, I know from several students' past experience, has been an issue. So when you're configuring the Vite plugin, see these highlighted points, do not copy and paste the entire thing into the Vite config.js here. Do not do that, because you will find, if you open this, you will find that it has the React plugin in there. Now, without this React plugin, your project will not work. And since, remember we mentioned that Vite is a general build tool, that is why they don't specify just the React specific configurations. Instead, they highlight what you need to add. So this is what you need to add. You don't replace everything you have in your config.js or config.ts file with what is here, because this will depend on whatever you've set up Tailwind with. For us, we've set up React. I mean, what you've set up, what you've used Vite to set up. For us, we've used Vite to set up React. So we need the React plugin for Vite to be able to build the React project as we go. Okay. So without this, if you were to copy this and just highlight everything and paste it, you will run into an error. And this error has been encountered by a lot of my students. This unquote reference error, React is not defined. That is because you've removed the import for the React plugin and the function call for that plugin. So you do not copy everything here and paste it here. So I will undo that. What you do is you copy the highlighted bits and just add them to what you already have in this file. So we already had the React, and this is an array here. This is an array of the plugins to call. So the documentation for Tailwind says we need to import the Tailwind CSS Vite plugin and then add it to the plugins array. So you copy this part and you add it. You add it as an element. So I think I erased it by default. You add it there, and we can see Copilot was already suggesting to us what we need to do. So you add it. You don't replace what was there. It's a big mistake. Do not replace what was there. This is needed. This import is needed. This import is definitely needed. So do not replace everything that is there with what you have here. Just copy the highlighted parts. This show you the changes that you need to make in your vite.config for us. Since this is not a TypeScript project, we do not have a TS file. We have a JS file. So we add that plugin in there. We do not replace. That's important. Then you add the import in the root CSS file. The CSS file that is going to be loaded all across your application, this is where you add that import. So for us, in our folder structure, our root CSS file is this index.css. This is the file that is imported in here in the main.jsx. Remember, the main.jsx is then the file, this file. It is the one that is linked to in our script. And so by importing the index.css here, that means whatever values are, whatever CSS properties, styles are within the index.css, they'll be available across the entire application. Now React works through components, and so with different components, each component can have its own CSS file. As we see in here, we have the app component with the app.css file. And so this means if you import, as it had been imported earlier before I cleaned up this file, if you import the app.css in this file, it is only going to be loaded where the app component is loaded. So with time, you'll add components, pages, etc. And you can separate the CSS files if you know that certain definitions, certain CSS definitions are only needed in a certain component, then you create a separate CSS file for it. Now, since we're using Tailwind, we don't need to do any of that. Actually, we can even clear. We can delete the app.css. We don't need it. Where do I think is at 100? That prompt for it was a bit too loud in my headphones. Okay, so we've deleted that. If you delete the app.css, you don't have to, but if you do, remember to remove that import from this file, otherwise you'll see an error or about importing something that doesn't exist. So if you're working with Tailwind, the only file that you need is this index.css, and this is where you add your import. So I will copy and paste that in there and save that file. So we don't need to do what Copilot is suggesting that we do. Then we start our build process with npm run dev. Now the moment we do that, Tailwind's done. Actually, right now, the Tailwind configuration is done. This is the last step. Then all you have to do is run the dev server, and it should pick up our Tailwind config. So I will rerun that server and go to our, you can already see that the font has changed because now Tailwind is in effect, and so you're able to use classes like this. If I change this to for example, you see that it becomes bigger. If I want the text to be blue, so text blue something, I don't know, 700, there it goes. So that tells us that Tailwind is working as it should, and that's all with the setup. Now again, this was not a React tutorial, so I'm not going to go into what components are, how to structure your React application. This was just setup, the initial setup, the setup that you'll be doing over and over and over again for the projects that you build. Now, with time and with experience, you will find that almost all the applications that you build have similarities in the structure. And so with time, if you get comfortable with one way to organize your code, you can create a template using that structure, just like we said you do with the Tailwind. with a plain HTML, CSS, and JS setup. So you can do the same with React, right? But with that, you're going to be locking yourself to a certain version of React and a certain version of Tailwind. So, but for the initial like 5 projects, this is something I always advise. Just do the entire setup manually, so that you can learn, so that it can stick. So even after you've created your template, it will not be easy for you to forget, because you will now not be doing the setup from scratch. You'll just be cloning the starter templates that you have created, and it comes with the React folder structure, maybe the authentication, the login, the register, everything, the API setup, global state management setup, those things that every app requires. So for you to know and understand those things, do them manually from scratch for the first like 5 projects, 5 major projects, not the tiny ones. Tiny ones don't count. 5 major projects, do the process from scratch over and over again. Repetition is the name of the game. Don't memorize, like don't do the process once and then write notes and start reading those notes and with the goal of memorizing that process. It doesn't work like that. Do it once, look things up, ask ChatGPT, do it a second time, do the exact same thing, look things up, go to the documentation. Do it at that time, you'll find that you're looking less things up. You might still look something up, but it will be less than the first 2 times. Then by the 4th time, you'll find, hey, you're doing it without looking anything up. By the 5th time, it's here, your fingertips. Yeah. So that's it. That's it for this video. It's already 7 minutes long. It's a bit too much. So I'll just end it here. Again, I hope the audio is okay, because I'm not going to redo this. It's 1:18 p.m. I have work tomorrow morning. Need to be in the office by 9, so I need to get sleeping. So I'll see you in the next video. I don't know when it will be. I'm not a YouTuber, so I'm not consistent with this thing. But hopefully it will be soon. If I see the need for another video, I will upload it. So till then, take care and code on.